Is everyone here? Shall we just start? I feel kind of funny standing behind this thing.
Everyone by definition is here.
If you're not here, raise your hand. Awesome. So do you want to talk about that first? Do you want to talk about where these logos came from? Is it annoying to have them going
No, it's
around,
cool.
around behind me? So
we have short attention spans anyway.
Okay. Let's talk about Bert and the logo for a second. So Bert Kersey, who started Beagle Brothers in 1980, but as he liked to say, who remembers when he liked to say that he started the company? Let's see if I can find it there. Yeah, right there. That's when he started the company.
Now I gotta translate.
Believe it or not, I woke up, I was dreaming about this number the other night. I was thinking too much about Beagle stuff. So he was a graphic artist in San Diego, and he worked for a lot of different companies, but he worked for a company called Food Maker. Can everyone hear me all the way in the back? If I start fading off, tell me to get louder and I will. Food Maker, they own Jack in the Box and a couple other restaurant chains. He just did graphic artwork for them. He programmed the big board at Jack Murphy Stadium in San Diego, and I think that first got him thinking about programming. And in fact, his first computer was a Radio Shack computer. Who remembers what those were called?
Trash.
Trash 80s. He bought a Trash 80. It broke 3 times in the first 2 weeks. So he took it back, and he almost bought a pet. Who remembers who made the pet? Commodore. Very good. For whatever reason, he thought, okay, I'll buy an Apple II. And the Apple IIs that were in the store that he could buy were the old integer basic Apple IIs. No disk drive, cassette tape. Who here has ever used a cassette tape on an Apple II? Fun, huh?
That's cool.
And he was just having so much fun with it. He describes what happened next as 2 big moves. Big move number 1 was quitting his day job and playing with the Apple II all day. You can imagine how thrilled his wife was. Bert and Sharon don't have any children, but nonetheless they had a nice home in San Diego with, I'm sure, a big mortgage on it. California homes aren't cheap for those of you who have lived there or are living there. So she also wasn't thrilled when she'd come home from a full day at work and find out that all he had accomplished was drawing a blue low-res cow or something equally thrilling. But nonetheless, he continued to play with it. And he came up with his tips, his Apple tip book. And he took out an ad in Creative Computing. I think he said it cost him about $300, maybe it was $350, which would be unheard of today. And he also had another book that he had read before doing that about how to make money in direct sales, and it said include an offer for something for free, and do this to make it stand out, and do that to make it stand out. And I had one of those ads to bring with me, but I don't think it made it into my folder. I'm sorry. I went through so many things to try to decide what I could sneak in and bring. Let me just double check. I have the very first or the very second ad. You may or may not have seen them online. Anyway, took out the ad, and people started requesting what he had. No, doggone it, I'm sorry. There's another folder, let's see. You're thinking, this guy's as unorganized as a programmer.
Hey.
I resemble that remark. Let's see. Oh, wait. Saved. See that command chart offer, that little ad right there? If I had an overhead projector, actually we can pass that around. Why don't we pass it around, everybody take a look at it. Started getting orders, and he had little programs, and he had, of course, integer, basic, and a cassette, and about 80% of his requests were for AppleSoft and disk, of which he had neither, so he had to scramble and upgrade his computer. And people started asking for utilities. Bert happened to know Roger Wagner, whom many of you know, and it started him thinking about utilities. And I think he read in a magazine article somewhere you could, he figured out what a no-op was. Bert didn't know machine language assembly code. He just knew if you stick an EA in here and there, it'll do funny things. And so he started doing that in DOS to see what it would do. And then he found where the strings for commands were, and then you could change those, and he created DOS-Boss. And his sales went from a couple hundred products a month to over 1,000 products a month, almost overnight. Back to the logo. Because he was a graphic artist, let's say, logos. Let's go to this one. He found these two great heads, put them together, and his original logo said Beagle Boys, O-Y-S. Has anyone ever heard this story? Raise your hand if you have. Oh, you have. Oh, okay. Carl's heard it. So, who knows who the Beagle Boys are? Carl probably knows.
Disney characters.
Disney characters. And so when he went to his attorney to get it trademarked, his attorney said, "Are you crazy? Disney will sue your pants off." So you got to change that. But he already had the logo designed. He loved it, didn't want to change it. And so he thought and thought and thought and decided, hey, I can stick an R-O in there where the O-Y was. It'll be Beagle Bros. And that explains why there's really not a period after the bros in Beagle Bros. I mean, everyone who knows anything about punctuation knows there should be a period after bros. And, you know, occasionally over the history of Beagle Bros, a period did sneak in here and there when someone else was doing the work, like some outside firm, but technically there never ever was a period. And also technically it never ever has been Beagle Brothers. It's always been Beagle Bros. So there's a little bit of trivia for you. So,
How did he choose that name?
well, he liked the Beagle Bros. He thought those Disney characters were cool. I mean, you know, he knew about the Disney characters.
Oh.
In fact, I have a framed cartoon of the Beagle Boys, sorry, not Bros, Boys, at home that Bert gave me, that's way old. That was one of his favorites from the Beagle Boys. And he knew that someday he wanted to have a company named Beagle Boys. His attorney put the kibosh on that.
Did he design the text for the logo himself?
Yeah, he did it all.
Wow.
And in fact, this other really nice one, what I call the life preserver with color. He did the basic design of it and then turned it over to another graphic designer to finish it off. You know, it's a life preserver. In the graphics world, this is called a hot dog, and then this diamond underneath here is really a floppy disk. I'm sure you've all noticed the little notch on the floppy disk. So another one of his creations. Interestingly, I'm gonna skip ahead in my thoughts for a moment. Micro software. For those of you that are really sharp, you'll notice. Actually, I should just select all of them, and I can go back and forth between them. That would be much smarter, wouldn't it? Why didn't somebody yell that out? Hey, stupid. Okay, that one says indoor sports. Well, you can't tell because all that stuff is in the way. Okay, so indoor sports, micro software. This was the second life preserver in color. Does anyone know why it doesn't say micro software?
He likes to pick on the big ones.
There was a little company in Washington owned by a fellow named Bill Gates that had some heartburn over that. In 1987, when I bought the company from Bert, they came knocking on the door and said, "We think you're trying to trade off of our name." I said, "What? Are you kidding? No one will ever confuse us with Microsoft." Nonetheless, we went round and round and round, and we got some concessions that we could sell everything in our inventory that had Microsoftware on it, and they would give us some money to change all of our logos. And anyway, just to me, a very funny little episode. They went after everyone who had Microsoftware in their name. There was a Smith Microsoftware. I remember he called me in a panic one day and said, "Has Microsoft called you? What are you doing?" But it's like, okay, this is a microcomputer. It's not a mini computer. It's not a mainframe. it's a micro, and this is software for it, so it's micro software. Anyway, they didn't get it.
Lawyers never do.
Yeah, they had no sense of humor and no.
Microsoft never does.
Yeah.
Well, that too. Lawyers.
So, okay, let's leave Bert and Beagle for a second and talk about me. That's enough about you, let's talk about me.
I like a man who speaks his heart.
You know, I remember as a child, I grew up in Virginia, born and raised. My dad was career Air Force. And I remember loving to tear things apart. And of course, there were no personal computers, even remotely. I was born in 1957. You know, so I'd tear apart my bikes, the radio, the transistor radio, the clocks, various things. And I'm not as good as Tony, so I didn't always get them back together. But I was a very curious young man. And I also, I was the third child of 5 children, but I was the oldest boy. So I was the middle child and the oldest boy. And so my father being the strict military man that he was, there were very high expectations put on me. I think the combination of those high expectations and the curiosity tearing things apart are what led me to love personal computers when I was first introduced to them. I got my bachelor's degree in computer science at BYU. While I was there, I had a business class that exposed me to the Apple II. The Apple II did not exist in the computer science department. We had IBM mainframes, a 360. I think we later had maybe a 370. We had a DEC 10 or 2 around and some other computers, but no Apple IIs. But I had this little business class that we had to write this program on this little computer called an Apple II. And it had a cassette. There was no disk drive. And as I recall, the program I wrote, which makes sense because I was in college, was a randomizer that would take inputted names and line you up with different girls for different dances at a big dance that was being held on campus. But that exposure to the Apple II just totally hooked me. The hook got in deep. And you know, I had access to Apple IIs at a lab on campus, even though none of my core curriculum required any interaction at all with it. I would go over there and play with it every opportunity I had. You know, I had classes in PL1, which I was talking about, also PLC, Algol, Lisp, APL, Snowball, Fortran, COBOL, C, so on and so forth. Using a variety of operating systems, but nothing with the Apple II. In fact, allow me a side trip. For my junior year at school, I was a TA for COBOL and Fortran. Now, who do you think was learning COBOL in school? The business majors. Who was using Fortran? All the engineering, science. Who do you think I had more questions from as a TA? COBOL or Fortran? I had no questions. Very few questions from the engineers doing Fortran. You know, they think logically, they get it. The COBOL, the business majors, wow, 1 out of 100 of those people understood programming. Plus, COBOL is not the best thing to program in the first place. But while I had that job, I noticed a job on the job board programming Apple IIs for the College of Education Instructional Science Department. Another chance to play with Apple IIs and get paid for it. It was a job writing educational software for children. We used, it was Echo or Echo something speech synthesizers. Anybody remember those? Yeah. And we used Animatrix. Did anybody ever use that? That was my exposure to high-res graphics and editable characters. A lot of fun. That job was so much fun. But you know, all good things must come to an end. I graduated. I had a wife who was pregnant. I didn't know that people could make a living with the Apple II, so I took a job with GTE in Phoenix, Arizona. They had a big R&D lab that they had just opened there with about 600 programmers. I felt a lot like a little fish in a big ocean. You know, we were we were designing 2 digital telephone switches, the first ever. It was before AT&T had theirs was the E something 5, ours was the GTD 5. We were doing a domestic version and international version. And you know, there must have been hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lines of code in this thing, and I was assigned my little area. Like I said, I was one little teeny spoke in this big architecture that was happening, and it wasn't turning my crank, no pun intended. But it was a job. I was about 2 months in, I found out that the company would loan you money to buy whatever you wanted. And I was having withdrawals for not having an Apple II, and so I got a loan from the company for whatever it was, $1,500. Bought an Apple II Plus mail order. I can't remember the name of the company I bought it from. And it came, I don't remember where, maybe it came with a disk drive. It had a disk drive. I think I bought a green screen locally, and I was off to the races. I thought, I'm going to write the world's greatest computer game. And so I went through all, everyone, all of you thought this? Raise your hand if you thought you were going to do this. You make $1 million. So I started coming up with ideas and started playing around writing a computer game in BASIC. And then I realized BASIC's not fast enough on this computer. And even though I knew Deck 10 assembler and some other assembly languages, I knew nothing about the 6502. Zero. I didn't even know that EA was a NOAA. And so I went to a computer store and I bought a book by Rodney Zacks called Programming the 6502. You had that book?
Oh, absolutely.
It was a great little book.
Wonderful. So
So I devoured the book and I started disassembling everything I could get my hands on. That's a great way to learn. And started playing around with various things in assembly language and realized I'm not ever going to write the next greatest game. And while I was in the computer store, I happened to notice these magazines. And Call Apple, Soft Talk, Nibble, and other ones, which I brought a couple of them. Soft Talk, Leaders Preview, January of '84, Nibble from December of '87, Soft Talk from October of '83. Anyway, I saw these magazines. It's like, wow, there is a kind of a universe around this computer out there. And so I bought one of everything, and then subscribed to everything, and started devouring the magazines. And I was looking at the ads and the articles, and it reconfirmed to me, hey, I can do what these guys are doing. And so, at work every day, I was using a big, fancy, gigantic, heavy IBM terminal connected to a mainframe that could do 80 characters across, which is what a person would expect. And I'd go home and play with my Apple II, and I had 40 characters across. Yeah, I saw ads for those 80 column cards, but it was like, that's a lot of money. And I'm, money's kind of tight. It was 81, 82. The economy was in the toilet, for those of you that remember those years. Interest rates were about 20%. I was grateful to have a job. Price of things was going up, so I thought, I can't afford that 80 column card, but on that high-res screen, it's 280 dots across. I think if I only allowed 4 pixels, including one for a space, I could get 70 characters across this screen. And so I created a program that I called SoftTurn. And sure enough, you could get 70 characters across and 24 rows, and nice little compact program in assembly language that would hide itself when you'd install it. And I thought, this is a great little utility. Other people have got to want it because you could program in it and run other programs in it. I'm going to sell this sucker. And so I went through the magazines, and I noticed there was a company called Sierra Online. Do you remember Sierra Online?
Your online systems that now.
The Online Systems, yeah. Later became Sierra Online. Very good, Ivan. I saw they had this word processor called, it was Superscribe or Screenwriter. I forget.
It was
changed
initially,
names.
It was initially
Superscribe?
Yeah.
And then it became Screenwriter?
Right.
And it had 70 characters across, and I thought, they stole my idea. Interestingly, Soft Talk, when they interviewed me, got that part wrong in the interview. But anyway, so I thought, okay, they stole my idea. I'm going to send it to them and see if they want to publish it. So I called them, And he said, do you sell software from outside authors? Yeah, maybe sometimes. So I sent it to him. And it seemed like forever. A couple of weeks went by, I called him again. Did you get my software? Do you want to publish it, sell it, make me $1 million? I didn't say make me $1 million. They said, we're thinking about it really hard. We've got so-and-so looking at it, and somebody else is looking at it. And a couple more weeks went by, and they said, we've made our decision. We're not going to publish it. Oh, I was heartbroken. My first little precious baby that I had created, they had just stomped up and down on it. So I let myself wallow in the mire for about 15 minutes and went back to the magazine. Okay, who sells that? Who sells utilities? I found Beagle Brothers, Beagle Bros. I saw the ad for DOS Boss. I was like, this might be a good fit for that company. Saw the phone number, called them. Hello, Beagle Brothers. Sharon Kersey answered the phone, Bert's wife. And I said, do you sell software from outside authors? She said, we're thinking about it. They were a young company at the time. She said, send us your program with the documentation and we'll get back to you. I said, okay, great, I'll do that. I go on the phone, documentation? What's documentation? She wanted a user manual. I had nothing like that. I didn't even own a printer. I have to show you something funny. I was going through some old files and found the receipt. Can you believe this? Am I a pack rat or what? The receipt from Computer Warehouse in Phoenix, Arizona for an Epson MX80 FT.
Oh, yeah.
$530 plus tax. What a ripoff! So I convinced my wife I had to have a printer and I had to have a word processor so I could create this great user manual that would convince these people to publish my software. So I spent some time doing that, sent it off to Beagle Brothers. I mean, think about then versus now. I put it all on a floppy disk, put it in a package with lots of cardboard, and mailed it to them. We would no more think of mailing a program today than the man in the moon. It's just funny to think about how things happened back then. Sent it off to Beagle Brothers, immediately got a response in the mail from Bert Kersey. This is the first letter I ever got from Bert Kersey. I was so excited.
Tear open envelopes like I do.
Yeah, well, I don't anymore, but that's the way I did it then because I was so excited. I couldn't wait to get a letter opener. June 24th, 1982. I'm sorry you can't all see it up on the screen. Hello, Mark. I won't read you the whole letter, just the first paragraph or two. When I encounter a disk for review that looks sellable, I like to express my initial reactions. Soft term definitely looks sellable to me, so here goes. Basically, everything looks fantastic. All of your claims prove to be true, and your documentation is superb. Your demo is not bad either. I wish I could write a demo program that good. You know why he says that? I took the demo in DOS Boss and converted it for my 70 columns. It was his demo entirely converted to display in 70 columns. So he's kind of tweaking me back there. He goes on to tell me what he thinks is great and what he thinks sucks in my program. And the biggest thing that he said sucked was the name. He said, that's really close to some other things. It's forgettable. The one thing that I really learned from Bert Kersey was to pick a name that is memorable, maybe meaningful, and that, oh shoot, what was the third adjective? What's that?
Unique.
Yeah, something that stands out. You know, so Bert actually came up with the name Flex Text. And from this letter, the end of June, very quickly, with a few more letters, these are all the letters that he sent to me over the next 2 or 3 months. He published it in November, and then it came out in the December catalog, which some of you have probably seen online. It's volume 0, number 2, so it's the second catalog. Right here, Flex Text, by new Beagler, Mark Simonson. Whoa, that just felt so good. And you can see Pronto DOS on there, frame up, from Tom Weiser.
Did you need GTE's permission for any of this, or did you just ignore that?
Did get what?
You need GTE's permission to do any of this, or did you just ignore that?
You know, I was young and stupid, I didn't know that I should have asked them for permission. I probably should have. They probably wouldn't have cared because what we were doing in the lab there had absolutely nothing to do with 6502 or Apple IIs or anything. I didn't do it during work hours, although before work every morning, after work every night, you know what I was doing on my little green screen. My wife thought she was not married for a lot of that time. So very fun, exciting times for me. Let me just look at my notes here to make sure I'm not forgetting some things that I wanted to hit with you. Oh, I forgot to share a funny thing with you. At the end of high school, you know, you take those aptitude tests? When I went in to meet with the guidance counselor, she told me that based on my aptitude test, I should go into agricultural engineering. That was a fancy name for farming. Is she trying to say that I should just be a farmer and I should just give up on everything else? I never did understand that. But I ignored her and I actually went into mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, design technology, and then stumbled onto computer science.
Now you'll never know.
Yeah, now we'll never know. I might have been the world's greatest farmer.
Right.
Or the world's worst, probably the world's worst. I was a city boy. I could not have been the world's greatest farmer. It just wouldn't happen. That was not going to happen.
Your guidance counselor.
Yeah.
Well, isn't an agricultural engineer someone who gives farmers bad advice?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I like to think of it as like a sanitation engineer. So, let's see. Okay, let me refer back to these magazines for a second. Who remembers this October '83 Soft Talk? The only reason I remember it and still have it is because it says right there, Exec Beagle Bros. And there was a really nice little article in here. On whatever page it's on, 65, when that's 6502. Yeah, yeah, would have been. So, that was Beagle Bros back in late '83. So yeah, October '83. He came out sometime during the summer. So, shortly after Bert started selling Flex Text, in fact, a month after, in December of '82, he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. He knew that I needed a certain amount of money to live, and basically what I was making at GTE. And he and Sharon said, why don't you come out to San Diego, do our tech support, you know, answer the phones, help people with problems they have with our software or whatever else. We'll pay you X, we'll also advance you Y. That will get you up to where your income is right now. And you know, when you're not answering the phone and helping people, you can just program your brains out. And it took me about 10 minutes, if that long, to realize that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to spend every waking minute programming the Apple II. Now that I knew it was possible to make a living programming the Apple II. Took me probably 2 weeks to convince my wife. But in January, about the end of the third week of January of '83, we moved to San Diego and started down that path, and I never looked back. A year later, I convinced a good friend, Alan Bird, some of you may recognize his name. He was a friend both at BYU and at GTE, to come out to San Diego. And I had a selfish ulterior motive. I wanted him to take over tech support from me because they didn't have anybody else. And then I could really program full time, and Alan did that. He came out with some wonderful programs, a Fat Cat, Decode, Program Writer. The list goes on. To skip forward a little bit, in about '85, Alan and I were getting a little big for our britches, and we thought, let's go off and start our own company. So we started a company called the Software Touch. Anybody remember the Software Touch? Yeah, and it was also about the time that AppleWorks came out. And you could get, you know, AppleWorks file formats from Apple. And so we developed a couple of programs that did something with those file formats, or at least I did. Alan actually dug into AppleWorks a little bit and created a macro program called AutoWorks. Anybody ever here have AutoWorks? And Beagle also released a macro program at the same time called MacroWorks. And I came out with a little program called FontWorks, which would basically let you print AppleWorks files with different fonts, not very elegantly, not proportionally spaced. You did it outside of AppleWorks, so just take the file and do it after the fact. You couldn't be inside AppleWorks and do it. But there was a demand for that. And we started selling a few of these programs, and almost the exact same time that we came out with these, Bert and Sharon approached me and said, why don't you buy Beagle Brothers? And I was like, ha, you're so funny, I can't afford Beagle Brothers, are you crazy? But they kept coming back and coming back and coming back, and during that time, Alan, as part of the discovery process for building his macro package for AppleWorks, figured out the way, all of the internal workings of AppleWorks basically, the way the segments were loaded and used, and he came to me and he said, we are partners in the Software Touch, it was the two of us plus a couple of other employees. He said, Mark, I have this great idea. I want to turn this into a software product that will allow people to write basic programs inside of AppleWorks. And I thought, basic programs are written by programmers. AppleWorks is used by people who really just buy applications and may or may not be a programmer. And I thought about it Alan went back to his office, I went back to my office. About 15 minutes later, I went into his office and said, Alan, I got a better idea. Why don't you create a programming environment that we keep proprietary, and we create all kinds of cool programs that work inside AppleWorks, and we'll call it Timeout, for lack of a better name. Sidebar, I hated the name Timeout, even though I came up with it, because it wasn't a true timeout. You were doing all of those things inside AppleWorks. So Alan agreed that that was the route we should take. He was going to write a spell checker, because AppleWorks had none and needed it badly. I was going to turn FontWorks into something that would print Macintosh fonts from inside AppleWorks. And you could switch fonts on the fly and embed graphics. And we started down that path. Bert and Sharon, for the umpteenth time, came back and said, why don't you buy Beagle Brothers? And for the umpteenth time, I said, I can't afford Beagle Brothers. I'd love to buy Beagle Brothers, but I can't. And I think it was a good friend of mine who was the attorney I ended up using said, why don't you do a leveraged buyout? And I said, a leveraged what? So he explained to me that it's a way that you can buy a company and pay for it over time. So I approached Bert and Sharon. They said, fine, as long as you hit the number, this magic number that we want to get for the company. And so in June of '87, June 1st as I recall, we sealed the deal. We were still working on Timeout behind the scenes. I knew that with Beagle's name, I would sell 5 to 10 times as many Timeout products as with the Software Touch. I also, in the meantime, got all of the Beagle programmers on board, and they were all working on Timeout applications once we had the LOI in place with Software Touch and Beagle. Anyway, long story short, September of '87, the first AppleFest that had been held in a long time. There were AppleFests before, but it had been quite a few years since there was an AppleFest. I don't remember why. I remember going to one in '83 in Anaheim. Was it '83? '83, '84, I think '83, and had a great time. And then '84, '85, '86, I don't remember any AppleFest. Does anybody else? It's like they fell off the face of the earth. Got word September of '87 there was going to be another big AppleFest, this time in San Francisco. Perfect. We're going to introduce Timeout. Were you there?
I was there.
I brought a few pictures.
I had hair back then, I remember you now.
I didn't have wrinkles and didn't have gray hair.
You had a beard though, right?
For part of the time I did. At that show, I don't think I did. Let's see.
Well, you were at other Apple Fest later.
Yes. Yeah, I've had a beard off and on my whole life, my whole adult life. As a child, not much. Okay. Yeah. So this was our booth. For us, it was a gigantic booth, 20 by 20. Here's Bert actually helping. Bert had already sold the company to me in June. This is September. What a guy. He's there helping me set up the Beagle Bros booth to introduce Timeout and getting nothing for it, other than, of course, the money he's going to get down the road as I gradually buy his company from him. Rob Renstrom, who wrote Timeout Graph, the spreadsheet graphing program. Randy Brandt in the background there, who wrote MacroWorks and Timeout Ultra Macros. What's that? There's Alan Bird again. Liz Barella was our office manager. John Obrick was one of our office workers and kind of a part-time programmer. Setting up the booth. Another blurry shot setting up the booth. The next day, I think I'm wearing different clothes. This is, the show is going. People are in the booth. We had an amazing reception to the Timeout series. As you can see, we have them on the wall here, the original boxes, 7 of them. You can't quite tell there's 7 there. Just a couple more shots of the booth. And then all of us, so I think some official AppleFest photographer came by and shot that. And this was after the show, having ice cream celebrating. So we had these 7 products. Everything from, like I said, spell checker to fancy font printing to graphing spreadsheets, etc. Just tools, macros, on and on. Now 4 of these products were completely done. Now we were taking orders like crazy at the show for all 7 products. Only 4 of them were done. 3 of them were not completed. 2 of them were mine. 1 of them I was helping with. So when we came back from the show, you can imagine I was at the office night after night after night. My wife and kids didn't see me unless my wife would bring the kids down to the office with dinner. We'd have dinner around the little lunchroom table, and then they'd go home and go to bed, and I would stay. I remember one stint, 100 hours straight in my office chair, except for getting up to go to the bathroom, and doing this at the keyboard. It's got to finish these programs. I was also responsible for pulling all the manuals together and getting them printed, doing the editing. I didn't write everybody else's manuals, I wrote mine, but I edited all of them, formatted them pretty for the printer, pasted them up. Anyway, it was a crazy time with not enough sleep. I think the proof of not enough sleep is in one of the manuals. I should have tried to find that before I left home. There's a numbered list of things, a sequence of things that you should do, and the numbers, instead of being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are like 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. I was sleep deprived.
What did you do for beta testing?
For Timeout,
Yeah.
we did have some local beta testers in the San Diego area. One in particular, a fellow named Chuck Newby.
Yeah,
Do you know Chuck?
yeah, we know Chuck.
Yeah. I have a picture of him somewhere. I don't know if I brought it with me. And a lot of other people. You know, we were involved in the local user groups there, and of course we all, as much as we could, beta tested each other's software.
Except that you were completely, your time was taken up trying to write your own.
Yeah, I didn't do much beta testing other than my own software. You know, and part of the reason that the Timeout series went so big was all the other AppleWorks add-ons at the time were not really things that were very useful inside of AppleWorks, if you remember. Not to slam them or anything, but you know, Pinpoint was a valiant effort, but it just didn't compare to what we were able to do with Alan's little piece of genius code that let us sit inside AppleWorks as though we were part of AppleWorks, and to use all of the capabilities that were built into it. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to show this. Yeah, the pressure was on for reasons like this. Let's see. Where did I put that? Okay, it's in here. This little puppy. We placed these ads, full-page ads, in all the magazines, bragging about all these great things we were going to be able to do. And so that was another reason that the pressure was on after AppleFest to get it all completed. Let's see. That's my pictures of Bert there, blocking that. And then, of course, after that ad, and we said things like guaranteed, most advanced, most powerful, fastest, easiest to use, guaranteed. We didn't have an ego or anything. Let's see, you probably remember these ads. Let's hold these up. Oh yeah. Pass these around if you want. That other one ever make it all the way around? If anybody cares to see those up close and personal. Let's see what else I brought. So we had a lot of fun with AppleWorks, the Timeout series. We eventually did ads like these, A Word from the Wise. Maybe you remember this one. With the the 7 timeout programs, and we quote people like Tom Weiser, editors from the magazines, just average users like Chuck Newby made it in here. Very boastful, not very humble at all on the things that we said here. Pass that around. And then Claris came out with this ad. I have some big posters of these ads. Remember this? The Porsche without the wheels?
No, you got a car.
Oh. What's that?
That is it. That is it.
That's the
That
end.
is it.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah, they're saying basically, if you have an Apple without AppleWorks, you have a car, a nice car without wheels, or something like that, right?
That's what
Some
it
Apple
says.
II owners still don't have AppleWorks. If you want to see that up close and personal. So, I had the brilliant idea. I love parody and satire. We went down to a Porsche dealer and borrowed some wheels and took them to a photographer and shot this one. It said, if you have AppleWorks without Timeout, and you've got wheels and no car. What's that?
What did Clarence say to them?
They were not really thrilled.
The Porsche dealer was like,
Yeah,
you
but
guys want to do what with it?
there was nothing they could do about it, though. Like, we didn't infringe on any of their trade dress or their trademarks or their intellectual property. But they got over it because about the time that they wanted to do an AppleWorks 3, Timeout was built on top of AppleWorks 2.0, as you may recall. Bob Listner, whose real first name is what? Who knows it? Rupert! Yeah, Bob Listner, who wrote AppleWorks after he did 3 easy pieces for the Apple III. I guess he had so much money and so little time, they couldn't convince him to do AppleWorks 3.0. Or he wasn't interested for some other reason. I don't know. He's a very, very nice guy. I have met him on a couple of occasions way back then. But he didn't want to do it. So Claris approached us and said, how would you guys like to do AppleWorks 3.0? And I said, absolutely, I'd love to do it. Figured out the terms. You know, they wanted the built-in spell checker, the spreadsheet graphing, some other things. So I forget what of the Timeout series they wanted in 3.0, but convinced all the programmers, I'll give you guys every penny they give me, and I'll keep a little bit of royalty on the back end from them. So we did AppleWorks 3.0, and I didn't have time to find those ads, but if you remember when those ads came out, it was like a tennis shoe or something like that. And then they gave us those tennis shoes, exact same ones, and we shot them with like a foot and a sock in it, and it had Timeout on the sock. So it was another play on it, like the car and the wheels. It was a tennis shoe and the foot and sock. AppleWorks 3.0 and Timeout go, you know, foot and sock and shoe, hand in glove kind of. So that was, we had a lot of fun doing that. Along about that time, I licensed all the Apple II software to Quality Computers. And let's see.
This was about when?
This was about, I want to say 1990, but maybe plus or minus a year. About 1990. I knew Joe Gleason. I knew he was a smart, aggressive guy and that he would do the best with it. So I licensed it to him, and he took care of all of the, I think he bought the inventory I currently had, and he reproduced it as he needed it after that. And he basically gave me a percentage of his business to do it because I wanted to focus on my next big thing, which was BeagleWorks, an integrated software package for the Macintosh. And we had actually worked on that inside Beagle off and on for a couple of years, had gone a couple of different routes, and finally really got everything on track in about 1990. And announced it to the world at Macworld 1991 in Boston, I want to say August or September of that year, whenever Macworld was. And turned a lot of heads. Claris also announced, Claris works at that Macworld, and TML announced whatever their works package was. I forgot. What was theirs called? Anybody remember that? You're almost all Mac users, right? Everyone here got a Mac? Anyway, I can't remember what their product was called. Anyway, I knew Tom Leonard really well. And, anyway, started selling lots of those, and people started coming to the door of Beagle and saying, we want to buy this package. And I could see that even though Beagle had a really big name in the Apple II world, we were almost a nobody in the Mac world. And the company that made the sweetest offer was WordPerfect. So I sold them BeagleWorks. They renamed it WordPerfectWorks for the Mac. And they wanted me with what they were buying, and so that's when I moved from San Diego up to Utah. And ended up helping them start up a consumer products division built around WordPerfectWorks. We acquired a lot of other software and one or two other companies and built that division from one product to somewhere between 20 and 30 products, from about 5 million in sales to over 100 million in sales. It was very heady. But at the end of 2 years of doing that, I was burned out. And so I retired. Let's see, how old was I? It was 1994. I was 30 something. Anyway, I had been burning the candle at both ends for so many years, having so much fun programming, that I needed some time off. And we, at that time, had 4 children. And my wife wanted to go back to school because when I graduated from BYU, she had not completed her school, but I ripped her away from there. So she went back to school, and I played Mr. Mom. If you ever get the chance to do that, I highly recommend it. I did that for 4 years. I'd get up in the morning, get the kids ready for school, make the lunches, send them out the door, clean up, go play golf. Then come home and be there when the kids got home from school, help my wife with dinner and whatever and cleaning up. And am I going way too long? I think you told me I had somewhere between 30 minutes and 2 hours. Is this in the least bit interesting?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit of what happened to me after Beagle. At the end of that 4 years, my wife had graduated. I was getting a little bit antsy. I had done a little consulting during that 4 years, not very much. I wanted to do something. I was reading the Wall Street Journal one day, which I had become addicted to at GTE many years earlier. And there was an article about Gibson musical instruments wanting to expand. I've been a guitar player since I was 9 years old, and at that time only owned one Gibson guitar, and thought, I want to go work with these guys. So it had a picture, you know, how Wall Street Journal does a little drawing. Now they have some real pictures, but back then it was just all little drawings, which is kind of anachronistic. Anyway, a drawing of the CEO and his name, which was unpronounceable from the way that it looked. It's Juskowitz, but it has way more vowels and consonants than what I just said. I sent him a letter and said, here's what I've done. I told him about all the Apple II stuff I had done, the Macintosh. I've run some businesses. I would love to help you do whatever at Gibson. I think I can help you. I didn't expect to get an answer back. I got a response. He said, yeah, come out. I'd like to meet you. And one thing led to another, and it ended up getting me a 1-year assignment at Gibson. Helped them buy a company called Opco. Do you remember that company? Yeah. And Chris, I forget the name of the CEO. Chris. Anyway, I was given a few tasks. That was one. I had all of Gibson Entertainment, which means Gibson had some cafes. I was in charge of those. Building the factory of the future in Memphis, even though I was based in Nashville. Just 1 block over from Beale Street, which if you're into music, you know all about Beale Street. And it was a very fun time, but unfortunately it only lasted a year. Came back to, lived in Tennessee that year, made a big mistake, which I hope none of you have ever made, of buying a home in Tennessee while I had one in Utah. Owning 2 homes is not fun. And anyway, I came back to Utah, or went back to Utah, and a buddy was a CEO of an internet company called Sourcing Link. They were started out as an IBM partner doing supply chain management kinds of things, the logistics, and he said, we're in trouble, I need your help. And so he hired me as the CTO, and I did that for a couple of years. We were in the Bay Area and in San Diego, and they were in trouble. They had a solution that was based on Lotus Notes.
Yeah.
I hope no one here wrote Lotus Notes.
But I used it.
It might have been a great application for what it was originally intended for, but these guys had gone way beyond what it was intended for, and were treating it like an operating system / programming environment that it was not intended to be. And so we got that all moved over to Microsoft SQL Server, and ironically, Microsoft gave us a lot of money to do that. I guess they were desperate for applications on their solutions at the time, I don't know. Had a lot of fun doing that, and we were thinking at that time of moving back to California, because obviously I fell in love with San Diego for the 10 years I was there. I had lived in Orange County for a couple of years. My wife was from Orange County. 3 of our 4 children were born in San Diego. Thinking of moving back, and then a neighbor knocks on the door. They're starting up a company called FlipDog in Provo. Anybody ever heard of FlipDog? At one time, it was the world's largest job board. We had 1 million jobs, we had 1 million resumes, we were getting more than 1 million unique visitors a month. And so who's the biggest job board now? Monster. Dice. There are a lot of very big ones. I think Monster's still the biggest. And at that time, we were neck and neck with a number of jobs. They had much more infrastructure and a much better solution than we had, but ours was based on a technology that would crawl the web and just pull the jobs in automatically rather than wait for them to be placed. Of course, we had a model that employers could place jobs as well. Anyway, it was very fun. When I joined the company as the VP of engineering, and they didn't have one at the time, incredibly enough. The CTO was over all of that, and he was spread too thin. It was actually 2 companies, Whizbang Labs, the parent company, and FlipDog as the child company, to be one example of what you could do with the Whizbang technology, the web crawling technology. And my opinion was they found the perfect application of it with their first child company, FlipDog. Anyway, long story short, there's so much that happened there. The chairman of Whizbang made me the COO, and well, he put me over marketing as well, and then he made me the COO, and then he made me the CEO, firing himself and keeping himself as chairman of the whole thing. And then the board said, they had already raised $30 million, said, we need more money, let's sell FlipDog. And so I did the dog and pony show and took FlipDog out on the road, and Monster came in with the biggest offer, and it was big. It was multiple digit millions for FlipDog, of which I got about this much, and original investors got about this much. But yeah, FlipDog was sold to Monster, and they very quickly took all the technology, put it into what they were doing, and ratcheted down what FlipDog was doing. But in my wisdom, I had negotiated a special contracts for myself and all the executive team that if they did anything like that and decided to let us go, we'd get a year at full salary. And so I found myself again with forced retirement. What am I going to do? And made some friends in Tennessee. This is just to show you how crazy my career is. And one of them was a cardiac anesthesiologist, another one a Harvard MBA, and another one owned some sonic drive-ins. Who's familiar with sonic drive-ins? The one who owned the sonic drive-ins had about 24 of them at the time. And the cardiac anesthesiologist said to the Harvard MBA and me, we got to get into this business. Look at this, look at Dave. He drives around in his big black Mercedes, he doesn't work, he's making all this money. And I said, fine, I'll invest with you guys, but I don't want to have anything to do with it on a day-to-day basis. And so when we moved back to Utah, they said, hey, Sonic's going to expand to Utah. Let's get the county that you live in. So we got exclusive rights in that county, hired someone to run it, so none of us had to be involved. And about a year into it, we realized, okay, if this thing is really going to take off, one of us 3 has to be in this thing every day. So guess who the one of the 3 was? It was me. I became a fast food guy. Can you believe that? From Apple II to fast food? Have you ever seen the game Fast Food Tycoon or something? Somebody gave me that as kind of a joke. So we built up our market, got up to 6 Sonic drive-ins, and then in 2008, I sold it all. It was very lucky timing as far as I'm concerned, because even though the experts say the economy started the downturn in 07, I didn't see it early in 08. So we sold that, got a very pretty penny for it, and that was almost 10 years after we got the exclusive rights for Sonic in that county, and found myself again with nothing to do, and that's when I ran into the founder of iPreserve. My son was actually working there, and he's a very smart technology guy, got a lot of energy, a million ideas. He's not a businessman. And unfortunately, somewhere along the path in my career, I hopped over the fence to the dark side, I told somebody, and I got an MBA. So I know how to run businesses, and anyway, I filled the bill for.
Before you started the
Wait,
MBA.
What's that?
When you knew that before you started the MBA.
Yeah.
When did you get your idea?
I went back to school in 2002 and got it completed in 04 at UCLA. I actually commuted from Utah to California
Whoa.
because I wanted to go to a top 10 school. And I never would have thought of going to a top 10 school, but I took a GMAT prep class, and the first night we took a test to see how we were doing, and the guy saw my score and he said, "You could go to a top 10 school." And I said, "What does that mean?" That was so stupid. So anyway, that got me thinking, wheels turning. What's the closest one to Utah? Okay, UCLA. I like California. So anyway, hopped over to the dark side. Now I'm running this business I Preserve. We are franchising ourselves. We have 15 locations, a couple of which are not open. We're in Utah, Idaho, Oregon, New Jersey, unopened in California, unopened in Florida, Mexico, this close to being in South Africa of all places, very close to being in Canada. We digitize media, A to Z. So old film, 8mm, 16mm, sound, no sound, we don't care. Video, photos, slides, negatives, audio of all kinds, books, magazines, newspapers, you name it, we digitize it and give it back to you in whatever format you want. Most people want it either on their hard drive or on a DVD. You know, I'm looking forward to the day that we have maybe 100, 150 offices around the country or around the world. And that's kind of where I am now. I'm sure I've missed a couple of funny stories that I wanted to tell along the way. If you have any questions for me, I would love to answer them. Yes?
Could you tell me the story about the Beagle Buddy program? To me, as a user group leader, in that time, that was the best thing as far as I was concerned for promoting your product, getting product support at the local level so they didn't have to try to get you down.
You know, I think Chuck Newby came up with the idea.
Chuck Newby was the person.
I think he was the original Beagle Buddy, and the idea was to have at least one person in every user group or in every geography that would be an evangelist for Beagle and our software. And I can't remember all the things that we incentivized them with. I think we gave them free software and
Free software is all as I ever saw
better
it.
access to the programmers, and it worked very well. It was, it was so nice. It was like having a dedicated Beagle employee in all of those locations. So thank you, Chuck. It was a little stroke of genius that he had. Chuck was a government employee. He worked for the Social Security Administration, as I recall. But he constantly had great ideas, and he loved us, and we loved him, and he loved, you know, Beagle products. Good question. Yes?
I'm curious, with your varied career that you had after the Apple II, because you did do a lot after you finished that, what was your reaction when you were asked to come here to be our keynote speaker?
Well, like I told someone upstairs, I was at the very first one of these in 1989, and it was on the board, whatever that was. Alan Bird came with me. I remember Barney Stone was here. I guess Tom was here. Tom still lived here back then. Tom Weiser. And it was a lot of fun. I do have one horrible memory of that '89 conference. I was in the restroom during a break with Alan Bird. He was at the sink next to me, and he went to pump the soap into his hand, and his hand was so close to the thing that it shot liquid soap all over my pants. It looked like I had an accident, a horrible accident. I remember being so mad at Alan, who was one of my best friends in the whole world. So my reaction, I haven't answered your question. I thought, they can't possibly want to hear from me about what it was like back in the day. And then Ken and I traded quite a few emails, and I thought, okay, they do. And I've just had a blast digging through my old files, thinking about the old days, and I wrote a quote: "The happiest time of my career life was programming the Apple II!" Exclamation right there. So I'm thrilled to be here. Quite frankly, it really makes me want to do some more 6502 programming. I gotta tell you, I was digging. I'll come right to you. I was digging through boxes in an extra room in our house. I still have printouts of all of my programs. I mean, I have them on disk, but I have printouts, the actual printouts of every program I ever wrote. And I was just flipping through them going, wow. I don't even remember that. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. So I really appreciate the invitation. It's been a blast. Your first
Yeah,
start.
how did you get the idea for Beagle Graphics? actually the first Beagle software package tonight?
Let's see, what was the genesis for Beagle Graphics? It was when Double High Res came out,
Right?
and I knew that the great thing about, oh, this reminds me of another story too, and then I'll come to you, Ivan. So the great thing about being a certified developer, which Beagle was, you know, you get all the advanced stuff. You get the prototypes, you get the software, you hear what's coming, you get invited to meetings. I remember hearing, you know, that they're coming out with Double High Res, and it's like, people are gonna need a graphics package for Double High Res, and so I talked to Bert and just started programming my brains out. Interestingly, on Beagle Graphics, there was another package called Double Stuff. Do you remember it?
Yeah.
And there was an artist who had created a picture for the guys who did Double Stuff, who did a picture for us too that we included in the very first version of Beagle Graphics that caused those guys at Double Stuff to want to sue Beagle. They're like, we know because you have this guy's picture on your disk that you stole code from Double Stuff. I mean, we were developing at the same time. And anybody who knew anything about 6502 could look at it and go, these are two entirely different programs. But boy, it put the fear in Bert and Sharon, and they ripped that picture off the disk, and we reissued the second version very quickly. So I have always loved graphics. I remember in college doing a very simple graphics program. What did I use?
So you were among the first to do Double High Res.
Yeah. And one of my professors was way into graphics. He had some presentations using 4 dimensions that would take overnight to generate on a mainframe. Anyway, just always loved graphics. The thing that it reminded me of, and then I'll come to you, Ivan, getting the prototypes from Apple. I remember, I think it was 84, I had a prototype of the first Apple IIc. Wouldn't that have been about 84?
Yeah.
And we had a family vacation planned, and I had some code I had to finish. Yeah, the Apple IIc. I was working, I think, at the time on Beagle Graphics and Triple Dump. I think I was working on those two. And so life in my family, when everyone on vacation, the kids go to bed, Dad's programming. Mom's not getting any attention. It's too bad. She's a wonderful lady. She's gotten attention since then. Anyway, so long story short, while we're on vacation, out of state, living in San Diego, out of state, some Einstein, 16 years old, brand new driver's license, runs a red light, totals our car. Totals our car. So when the vacation's over, we got a rental car, vacation's over, we have to fly home. We fly home, land in San Diego. At the baggage claim, we get there, and I see somebody in the distance with a bag that looks exactly like mine. It's before the bags with wheels. He's carrying this big, heavy Samsonite. I thought, man, that looks a lot like the one my parents gave me when I graduated from high school. But went back to the carousel and was like, wait a minute, there's all of our other bags. I went after this guy. I said, excuse me, I think you've mistakenly taken my bag. Pretty polite, huh? And the guy turns around and sees me, drops the bag, and runs. That was the bag with the 2C prototype in it. Can you imagine how ticked Apple would have been at me if I would have lost that prototype?
They might have taken his
You
photo.
should be famous now.
Yeah. Okay. You had a question.
Yeah, it seemed like, you know, certainly at the outset there were a lot of tools for programmers or users, you know, things like DOSBoss and things, you know, that are sort of a little more low level as opposed to something in AppleWorks, which is, you know, a little more application based within an application. Was there ever sort of a feeling of change in the company identity in terms of making these more application-oriented projects as opposed to user-oriented products as opposed to developer-oriented products?
It kind of happened in steps. So yeah, definitely the people who were buying Apple IIs when DOSBoss and Flex Text came out, they were hobbyists. And most hobbyists either knew how to program or wanted to learn how to program. In fact, most were self-taught. And so that was the market. By the time we got around to things like Beagle Graphics, it was a hybrid program. There was an application in there that you could draw with and do some really cool things, but it was also available to programmers with the commands that you could use to put high-res, double high-res graphics in your own programs. Triple Dump, kind of the same thing. It was an application, but you could also use it, if you're a little more sophisticated, in your own software. And so that was kind of our half step from utilities to applications, and then we took the full step, of course, with Timeout and AppleWorks.
kind of along with the users.
Along with the users. More Apple II buyers didn't know anything about programming, didn't want to know anything about programming. It was a tool to them. The computer was not a fun toy box to play in and experiment with. It was a tool to get something done. And for all of us, it'll always be a fun toy box to play in.
Well,
And you occasionally get things done on it.
At need.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, you sold the Apple II software for quality, and then I guess the Macintosh to WordPerfect. What happened to Beagle Bros as a company?
I
Did they
kept
just
it
go
alive
away?
for a while. For a long time, I remained a certified developer because I didn't know what I was going to do. Actually, during that 4-year first retirement, I created the 2 big posters, 24-inch by 36-inch posters that came as a match set of every chord the Beatles ever played. I just know it's a weird thing to do, but I'm a music nut and I play the guitar. So I went through all their songs, and anyway, it's this amazing chart. It's 200 and some odd chords. And at the bottom of it, I had the Beagle logo, Beagle Bros Inc., and I said, remember how Bert used to say Apple's a trademark of you-know-who? I put the Beatles is a trademark of you-know-who. So I did use it that one instance. A few years back, I finally stopped paying California the franchise that corporations have to pay. It's a fee of $600 or $800 or something. And so technically it doesn't exist anymore. No one has the trademark. One of you could run out and try to trademark it. There was a fellow who had the web address beaglebros.com. I don't know if he still does. He had it for a long time. I've thought many times over the last at least dozen years, I want to do a Beagle tribute website, but then there are a couple of really good ones there already, and so maybe I'll just, whatever they don't have, scan it or get it scanned at my company and send it to them, just to flesh those out, fill them out. Good question. Yes?
Did you reclassify any of the software as freeware for people?
I think we did all of that. I think all of the software we put out there and said it's free to distribute, free to use, free to own, free to have, a long time ago. I think maybe even when I was at WordPerfect or shortly thereafter, including the documentation. It was always unprotected. We never protected anything, and I believe it's been a decade and a half at least that it's all been
Stood as a shining example.
Thanks.
Why did
The Kerseys.
why did they want to sell?
Why did they want to sell?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Thank you for asking that. Bert and Sharon had worked really hard. Like I told you I was burnt out when I left WordPerfect after 2 years and needed some time off. I think Bert was feeling the same way because, he was really wearing a lot of hats. He was such a great graphic artist. He put so much effort into all of these catalogs, into all the ads. There's so much tiny stuff in here. Yeah. So he was programming, he was doing creative with the ads, the catalogs, the manuals, the boxes.
The 1 and 2 liners?
Yeah.
Who came up with those 1 and 2 liners?
He came up with most of them. Some were sent in by users who occasionally have contests and people would send things unsolicited. But I just think he was tired. He started the company in 1980 and I bought it in 87. That's a long time to be the main guy. And I learned so much sitting beside him. Learned how to paste up ads and manuals and doing graphics and importance of this, that, and the other thing. And that's, quite frankly, part of the reason why Alan and I started the Software Touch. I thought I had learned so much from Bert that rather than get a 20% royalty, hey, I'll keep 80% and give somebody else a 20% royalty. That sounds pretty good to me. It's that dark side business talking to me.
What did they want to do? Did they do anything else?
He essentially retired, although he did a couple of ventures. He has one now called Backyard Owls or Barnyard Owls or Backyard Barnyard Owls or something. What is the name of that website?
Barnowls.com.
Barnowls.com, thank you. It's really fun. It's just one of his hobbies. He has a train hobby. He has a bird hobby. He likes fast cars. What else? He lives out in the country. He lives in Fallbrook in a beautiful area. Yes. When I first met him, I went into his house, and through I don't know how many of the rooms, about this level, there's a platform about that wide and a train set running. And there's holes, there's a little hole in every wall. It goes through all the rooms at that level. He's a train nut.
But did you ever, at the time, before you licensed to Quality, did you ever formally discontinue any Beagle titles? Or just keep selling everything?
I don't believe we ever formally discontinued anything. As long as we had inventory, and I think we always had inventory of everything, we never discontinued anything. So even though we may not advertise it during a particular time frame, someone could call in and order it.
I remember that specifically, you said several times I've called and get something. In the old DOS 2.3 days, someone had to have it.
What was it about the Apple II that, like, you were already doing plenty of programming in other environments, obviously, and yet, the Apple II was what enchanted you, you know, and it doesn't sound as though you spent much time with its peers or the IBM PC when it came out. Why Apple II?
A couple of reasons. Even though when I first started programming, I didn't know 6502, I really liked assembly language. I remember my first computer class at school was PL1, and fell in love with programming because of that class. It was, for back then, a high-level language. The second semester in computer science, Dec 10 assembly, I didn't get it. I did not get it. There was no manual, there was no book, there was no textbook. So we had notes from the professor, and I remember one day tearing my hair out looking at this code, not getting it, and just going through it line by line by line by line. And then one day, luckily early in the semester, the light came on. It was like all of a sudden, okay, I've got kind of a memory map in my head, and here's the registers, and this is what's going on, and it all made sense. Everything fell into place. For me, it was a huge epiphany. For everyone else, it was probably just obvious, but maybe I'm dumber than the average, I don't know. So I wanted to get back into assembly, and also, quite frankly, it's the micro that I had experience with a little bit. And when I looked at the other stuff out there, the PET and the Trash 80, and I don't remember the other ones, the Sinclair, and yeah, I thought those, they don't strike the chord in me that the Apple II strikes. And you know, as a programmer, all of you know, when you fall in love with something, and it's a world, this is a world that you have inside the computer. It's your domain, your little universe, you're God. And you tell the planets where to move, and that's quite addictive and quite empowering. And I'm just glad that the luck part of it, I had to pick the Apple II and not something stupid like the PET or the Trash 80.
So
No offense to people who had PETs and Trash 80s.
You're a recovering programmer.
Maybe if somebody had fallen in love with them, they would have gone better.
Maybe. But, I think knowing what I know now, none of those had the architecture, none of them had an equivalent of WAS. It was such a simple operating system, simple architecture, and that was the beauty of it. Yet expandable.
Open.
Yeah, it was completely open.
You could program.
And the elegance of it all. I fell in love with the elegance of it all. Yeah, I'm so grateful there was a Steve Wozniak.
Have you met him?
Yes. Very,
We had
very.
him here as keynote speaker one time. That was a lot of fun.
The thrill of my life when I met him and he was telling me about my software that he had bought and had used or was using. Thrill of my life.
That's great.
Was Beagle Bros ever tempted to write PC utilities once that market was obviously huge?
When Bert owned the company, they actually did write one PC program. I forget the name of it. He and Jack Cassidy did it. I cannot remember the name of it. I think they had marginal success with it.
There was Bert's big tip of the Commodore 64.
Oh yeah. I had no interest in doing those. I mean, I've had to use PCs and Windows and all that throughout my life because everyone has to. But yeah, I was never tempted to program for any of those. Good questions. Yes.
So, what happened with that prototype 2C.
Well, maybe you have it.
You ever think you'd see another one?
No. Yeah. Yeah, they told us it was called the Lolly. Has anybody heard that name? The Lolly?
It says the Lolly drive on the drive on here.
Yeah. And I understand they had some other nicknames, some other code names, so that they could find out who it was that was leaking information to the press, the evil press.
They even had an unprintable one, I think, for the 2C.
Is that right?
A little F or something.
I've never heard that one. You guys are asking great questions, Ken.
When I first emailed you about this opportunity, your first response was, "How did you find me?"
I thought I had become invisible.
Well, it's not that I think you went into hiding, but obviously you've pursued other interests since the Apple II, and so has Bert Kersey with his trains and his owls. On the other end of the spectrum is Bruce Rosenblum, who 25 years ago did Sideways, which lets you print spreadsheets in landscape format, and now he's doing XML programs for Microsoft Office, so he's still doing text manipulation. So what causes some programmers to dabble in Apple II and then do other things, even though they left a huge impression, and not stick with that, whereas other people, 25 years later, this is all they want to do?
You know, I have decided, I've thought about that, and Bruce Rosenblum is a great guy. We used a company that he was at called Turning Point Software to help us with BeagleWorks. A lot of good memories of Tim Tepper and Bruce and the guys there. I think I've decided that I am a serial entrepreneur. I look back across my career and I see all these things that I start up and build up and then sell. Yikes. There's other things that I did that I didn't include in my career overview. I've had a couple of musical instrument companies. I'm not a serial murderer, but I think I'm a serial entrepreneur. I get a big.
You didn't kill any of the companies.
Yeah, no. I get a big thrill out of starting things up, or coming into something that's relatively young and improving it, building it up, and seeing it be successful, and then I also get a big thrill from selling it. Is that sick?
You're the opposite of the guys who come in, buy it up, and tear it apart and sell the parts.
Yeah.
How many companies have you sold?
Oh gosh. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 that I can remember.
How many did you found that were unsellable?
Yeah. Well, I founded a couple that I founded a consulting company that was just me that I folded into Beagle. I founded Software Touch that I folded into Beagle. I had to buy out Alan Bird, but then I folded it into Beagle. One of the musical instrument companies I shut down. I couldn't find a buyer for it. And the other one is on the back burner. I have a couple of partners in it, and it remains to be seen if that's going to sell or not. But I got into both of those just because I love music. I love playing the guitar. I love musical effects. I'm in an old man's rock and roll band. We play classic rock. We play college football games, weddings, high school reunions,
Apple conferences,
general parties. Yeah. I've had the opportunity because of those two companies to meet all of my heroes, like Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top and Peter Frampton and Adrian Belew. And I just saw Paul McCartney last week in Salt Lake.
They all use your products at some point.
So what's your next company?
I don't know. I'm in the middle of this one. I feel like this one's got at least 2 years, maybe longer, before it will be built up big enough to sell it to somebody. And then maybe I'll retire for good. I'm not sure I've got the retirement thing down either.
You may have answered this question already, but do you have a favorite Beagle Bros Software product?
A favorite Beagle software product? Wow, that's a tough one, because they're like my children, especially the ones that I wrote. Yeah, I would have a hard time saying which of my 4 children is my favorite, but of my software programs, or of all the Beagle software programs, that is really, really, really hard to answer. I don't think I can answer that.
Which was your favorite Apple II magazine?
Probably Call Apple. Think about that. I love loved Soft Talk, I loved Nibble, I loved Insider, A+ was okay. Call Apple was it's for programmers.
Yeah.
I mean, all the other ones had a mixed audience. Call Apple was down and dirty, and I loved that.
Do you still stay in contact with the other Beaglers, or have you kind of
I see and talk to John Obrick once in a while, Alan Bird once in a while, Randy Brandt less frequently, Rob Renstrom almost never, although I'd love to see him. Tom Weiser I just reached out to again because I haven't talked to him in too many years.
Kansas City.
He's in New York now, New York area. Unless he came back.
He's up east. He's
I just reached out to him today. I said, "You won't believe where I am."
What do you say?
He hasn't responded yet. I'll see if I have a response when we go back to work. Pronto DOS and FrameUp were his two claims to fame, and then Open Apple and A2 Central.
I think congratulate one of the authors on the one KFest here. I got the reaction more or less that they were tired of it and they didn't feel they got enough out of it. So
I look at the things you guys are doing here, and I read through what you did last year. It's amazing what you're doing. I don't know how you can say you're not getting enough out of it.
Well, no, I mean one of the authors of that book. DOS.
I see. Bert Kersey, we trade emails once in a while. I haven't actually physically seen him since about, wow, it's probably been almost 10 years. Took him out to lunch in San Diego. I didn't. You know what? You want to hear something funny? My youngest daughter, for whatever reason, Googled my name 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, and up comes this KansasFest announcement. The next day she's like, "Dad, are you going to Kansas?" I said, "Yeah, how did you know?" She said, "I was Googling your name and this thing popped up."
What's your current personal use or involvement with computers now? Are you simply a user? Is it simply a business tool? Do you still like to play it, programming? What do you do?
I'm really, really sad to say I'm mostly just a business user, although I do like to do crazy things with Excel spreadsheets. Yeah, I still own 3 Apple IIs. I have my original 2 Plus, my first 2E, and my first 2 GS. And unfortunately, at this point in my life, I'm sad that I sold all the rest of them. At one point in time at Beagle, we had every version of every Apple II and every version of Macs up to that point through the early 90s. And for whatever reason, I've given away or sold or thrown away.
What do you use now?
I love this MacBook Pro. This is my go-to computer. I also have some Windows crappy laptops and stuff. But yeah,
Okay, you can tell us.
yeah, and I only use them when I have to. Good question.
Any chance they're gonna get lit up?
Any chance what?
Any chance they're gonna get turned back on?
Oh, you know, this conference has inspired me. I am going to turn all 3 Apple IIs back on. That reminds me, I have I think it's a 10 meg hard drive on one of those Apple IIs. My very first hard drive was 5 meg, and it was about this big. I forget the name brand. Was it a cider? It was probably a cider. I think that's what it was.
Because I saw their booth right next to yours.
I think that cost almost $2,000. Did it not?
Oh, the cider was the first cheap one, wasn't it? But the cordless drives were like 2,000.
I think the ciders are like 700.
Whatever I had, I swear it was almost $2,000.
Yeah, well, the early cordless drives were.
5 megabytes.
Yeah. No, I just bought one.
I just bought a 1.5 terabyte drive for $99. You think about that spread.
Really?
I mean, it's thousandths of a penny per gig or something.
Yeah,
versus it would have been like $400,000 for a gig back then.
Yes.
It's mind-boggling. I mean,
But
I love that
you only
trend.
needed 48K of memory to make a computer do
Well,
something.
do you remember when Bill Gates said no one should ever need more than 640K? Do you remember that?
Well, he was right.
Yeah. It's funny the things you guys are reminding me of. Good questions. Anything else?
I didn't even start playing with personal computers until '86. I had learned Fortran and fiddled around with digital stuff in the service. from 1970, 69. But I just didn't see computers as being much fun, other than, you know, as a communications device. And then I got turned on to Ultima 2 in '85 and became addicted immediately. Got the first Apple II GS in my county, and I went to my first AppleFest in '88 or '89, and I know that I saw you at a Beagle's booth.
Yeah, we had a big booth.
Yeah.
It was different than the pictures that I showed you. We had
And
a big booth
I was
built for
collecting
us.
Timeout stuff. Anyway, I really missed the AppleFest. They were a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We had a great time.
Were you tying knots in string then?
I'm sorry?
Were you tying knots in string then?
I've been tying knots since I was 10 years old, but I've only been,
Doing it in public for the last.
it's grown over the years.
I've for several years used loading timeout, about 50 timeout applications as my disk drive speed test.
Oh, fun. Maybe other funny things to show you.
We'd love to see them.
Don't do this.
Oh, that's just the, you know, these.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Bert created these and he had his buddy Fred Crone draw them for him.
Nice.
Yeah. Everyone loves those.
I was recently telling somebody about these because they were talking about some warning label on something.
Oh, here's some interesting, semi-interesting things. Very interesting to me. Maybe interesting to you. Let's see. That's at that's either an AppleFest or a Macworld. I don't remember which. Let's see, at our booth. Also at our booth. Oh, that's at Macworld because they're introducing BeagleWorks. Let's see. This is at the Old Town office. When Bert and Sharon finally moved out of their attic, they had a really beautiful attic that they had remodeled for the Beagle offices. Anyway, first anniversary party at the building in Old Town where they leased office space. That's
What year was that?
This was, let's see,
What city was it?
San Diego. Yeah, Old Town part of San Diego. Let's see, based on the age of my oldest daughter, I would guess that was, let's see, 85. My wife, 2 of my 4 kids, Alan Bird, his wife, his kids, Liz Barella, office manager, Rob Renstrom, Bert Kersey, Sharon, holding one of Sharon Tangberg's twins, Randy Brandt and his wife and their little baby, me, and Jack Cassidy. Let's see. Me and the older of my 2 younger brothers at a show. I'm not sure if that's an AppleFest or a Macworld. Everybody gave me a cake called World's Greatest Boss Day. Very funny. Okay, back to the beginning. Let's see, anything else interesting on here? Yeah, that's mostly interesting stuff. So, any other questions? Yes.
You know, being a larger publisher, what's your relationship like with Apple, aside from like the prototype? Did they come and say, here's what we have coming down the pipe, we want you to develop for it?
We had a very good relationship. I only ever really had one complaint with Apple, and it was they didn't give the Apple II enough attention. They did treat us very well. We got all the prototypes, we got all the looks at whatever software or campaigns or whatever was coming down the pike. They did very nice things. I remember one time, for what seemed like no reason at all, they flew me first class from San Diego up to Cupertino to meet with them. Got to meet with Steve Jobs and John Scully at the time. And I don't remember if it was that occasion or another time, begging them before the release of the 2GS to increase the resolution, you know, from 192 lines to or whatever it is. It's been so long since I programmed the GS, I can't remember. How many lines of resolution is it? 200. 400. I want to double what it was.
Yeah, the
That
video
would've-
chip was capable of doing 400 interlaced, but they decided not to do it. When they came up with the video overlay card, they allowed that option.
I was convinced that they were crippling it on purpose so it wouldn't compete with the Mac.
I think you're right.
And maybe from their point of
Yes.
view it made sense, but it really made me as an Apple II programmer really upset.
Yeah.
But other than that, they were very good to me. I loved them.
Do you think it was feasible, either technically or economically, for them to have a greater backward capability, backward compatibility in the Mac to the Apple II?
Better than the 2E card?
Yeah, well, 2E card came after a few
Yeah,
years
yeah.
when the opportunity was gone, and I think that machine was something like 10,000, wasn't it?
What?
Yeah, I don't remember.
What was the
The
machine
price?
that the 2E card on?
LC.
LC,
Yeah.
cheap.
Was it a cheap one?
Yeah, it was like less than 2,000.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
At that time, there'd been several years gap.
You're
Yeah,
thinking,
the 2E card.
you're thinking
You're
of
thinking of
the
Lisa,
Mac 2
probably.
FX, which was
Oh.
$10,000.
Oh, that must have been it.
Yeah, that was long
True.
before the 2E card.
My wiring got crossed.
Yeah.
But do you think it was technically or economically feasible, or do you think they were right from an economic point of view, if wrong technically, or what?
Well, they certainly had the horsepower to do whatever they wanted. They could have made the Mac run Apple II software as slicker than
Oh, yeah.
Sonnet. But again, I think they chose not to do it because they internally decided it's in our best interest to kill the Apple II and not be distracted by what's happening there. Even though they never really admitted that or publicly stated anything even close to that, the decision had been made, we're going after Mac and Mac only.
I think that attitude has persisted in the company throughout its history and continues today. I mean, they make a decision about where forward is, and they don't keep backward the line for long.
Well, they dropped PowerPC.
Right.
Well, I think.
Well, and you know that, I mean, Rosetta is already an optional install in Snow Leopard. You know it's gone in the next release, and then all your PowerPC apps are gone. So, I think
It's somewhat out of date if you're running Tiger.
I think their experience with the Apple II actually convinced many of the management and engineering staff that having to revealing the low-level architecture to that degree made it really impossible to evolve the architecture and keep pace with technology, which is why all the Apple IIs run at 1 megahertz. So when they did the Macintosh, they shielded all of the low-level details from any outside use, and that allowed them to evolve it and keep going. And of course, you wouldn't ever have Apple II compatibility without, burying yourself in all of that.
Any other questions? I see people falling asleep. We might be done.
Oh, the purpose of this.
I haven't had a chance to meet everyone. If you would like to meet me, I'd love to meet you. It may mean nothing to you or it might mean something to you, but I'd love to shake your hand and meet you if you'd like that. So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Keep doing what you're doing.
A couple minutes after the question.
On behalf of the KansasFest community and the Apple II community at large, you are the first recipient of the annual Apple II Forever Award.
This is awesome. Thank you. Great. That is great. Thank you. Someone take a picture of us.
There you go.
Nice award.
That's awesome.
We hope that do some more 6502 programming.
AppFest doesn't end until Saturday.
We've got another night.
I'll have to break out my 6502 commands chart. I bet you can borrow one.